Hi, welcome to the Black TV Show podcast. I'm your host, Miriam. Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 22, The Cosby Show Season 1, episode 22, The Slumber Party. This episode aired March 28, 1985. The show starts with the opening with a brief voiceover from Keisha Knight Pulliam, explaining that this episode is meant for kids, but also adults can watch. Because this is really revolving around her and her friends, I guess they really wanted to promote this episode for kids. And so we start off and we see Vanessa in the living room. We see Rudy in the living room, and she's kind of bored. She wants to play with someone, and Vanessa comes down with her skates, but hides them. And Rudy asks where she's going, and Vanessa's like, "I'm just hanging out with friends." And Rudy was like, "Can I come with you? I see you ice skating." And she's like, "No, you're not gonna have fun. It'll be a bunch of 11-year-olds. You're not gonna have fun." So Vanessa leaves, and then Theo comes down, and Rudy asks if he wanted to play. He was like, "No, I need to talk to Dad." And Rudy was like, "Well, Dad's busy cleaning the stove." And Theo asked her, did he ask for his help or ask for any help? And Rudy was like, "No." And he's like, "Okay, good." So he goes into the kitchen and talks to Cliff and says, "Oh man, you should have let me know that you were doing this. I could have helped you." And Cliff just laughed. He's like, "Yeah, right. That's not going to happen." And so Theo asks, if he can buy more tickets or get a lot of his coworkers at the hospital to buy tickets for this football banquet thing. I don't know what I guess it's just a party for the football team. And Cliff was like, "No, because all my doctor friends run away from me when I try to sell them tickets." So he's like, "No, you should try going outside door to door and try to sell those tickets." He sold 2 to Cliff and Claire, but he also needs to sell 8 more to reach his quota. And so Cliff puts the stove back in the wrong way, and so he tells Theo that he needs to put the stove back to how it was because he did it backwards. So Theo has to go help. And Rudy's on the phone, and she gives her her details, like her name, where she lives, and all that stuff. And Cliff walks in and is like, "Who the heck is she on the phone with?" Because you don't just let a 5-year-old be on the phone. And so the person on the phone was his name. I forgot what his name was, but he was from Ireland. And so he was like, "Okay, I need you to get off the phone." So he takes the phone from Rudy and talks to the guy on the phone and puts the phone down. And Cliff was like, "I told you you're not supposed to be on the phone." And Rudy says, "Well, I'm bored." And he was like, "Well, what about those the books that he bought?" He's like, $3 million worth of books that he got for her. And she was like, "I'm not in the reading mood today." And then he was like, "What about drawing?" She was like, "Well, I already drew." And Rudy asked if her friend Marie can come over. And Cliff thought he was her best friend because he suggested that she can play with him. And she was like, "No, I'd rather have my friends and a few other friends of mine to come." And Rudy asked for a sleepover, and Cliff was like, "Okay, well, maybe, yeah." And so then Claire comes down, getting ready to go to a seminar. And Rudy tells Claire, "Oh, my friends are coming over." And Claire was like, "What? I am not even home tonight. I'm going to be coming home very late for my seminar." And Cliff says, "Well, you've always said that you wanted to entertain more." If I ever say that, to entertain more, I would not want to entertain a bunch of kids. I mean, when someone says entertain more, you'd rather have people your own age to entertain. And so the plan is that these kids are going to come that night, or this night that we're talking about. And Claire was like, "Okay, fine. I'm going to get Rudy's class list and it has all the parents' names to contact." So then Denise comes home, and Cliff asks, if she can help out to, entertain, basically. And Denise was like, "Oh, who's coming over?" And he was like, "Lively people." And Denise was like, who exactly is coming over?" He's like, "A bunch of Rudy's friends." Claire really just said it like it is and said a bunch of Rudy's friends. And Denise was like, I got plans. I don't got time for kids. And so then the next scene is we see all the kids walking in behind Cliff, and Theo at the end of the line with holding a bunch of stuff in his hand. I don't know what it was. It was like a bunch of winter gear and all that. And there's 8, I counted, there was 8 kids in total. And Cliff was using Navy words to line them up, and they all stand and like they all bump into each other. And so he tells all the kids to take off their jackets and go to sleep. And they're like, we can't go to sleep. It's too early to go to sleep, you know? And so, and he, like, Cliff was like, you'll wake up in the morning and we'll drop you off right away. He basically just doesn't want to take care of all these kids, right? And so he goes through the line of, you know, each person. So we see Rudy, there's Rudy and her 6 friends that are girls and this one guy. And we're going to find out that one guy, his name is Peter. He is the neighborhood friend to Rudy. He's in a few other episodes in season 2. And his real, like the guy that's playing this kid is, her real name is Peter. And we'll find out that in this episode, a lot of the people, a lot of the kids in this episode, the name that they say is their actual name. It's once you look at the end credits, you're like, oh, their first names are exactly what they said when they introduced themselves. And so Cliff gets them all to say this all at the same time and says, promise to not run outside of the house, promise to not run inside of the house, not to touch, pick up, step on, and anything that looks interesting. And they all yelled this out all at the same time. It's very loud. And so then he asks, does anyone have a note from their parents? So Desiree comes to Cliff, and Desiree, the girl that's playing Desiree, her real name is Desiree in real life, and she has a note. And then we have I don't know how to say her name. It starts with an N. And she says, she brings her a note, and Cliff is like, oh, it says that you're a compulsive gambler and the police are after you. And she's like, that's not what it says. But it actually says that she's allergic to milk. And he asks, like, can you have cookies? And she was like, well, I've never had cookies. So Cliff was like, well, I guess you're not having cookies at all. And then he calls out Peter, and he looks at him and be like, I don't remember picking you up. And Rudy comes and, like, to his defense and say, he lives outside, like, he's our neighbor. And so Cliff was like, why did he come? How did he get in the house? And Rudy was like, well, because when we were all playing, you said to everyone to all line up. And so he lined up. And Cliff was like, really? And so Peter followed the line and came in. And so Rudy asked, like, if he can stay. And so he gets Theo to go outside to the neighbor's house and ask the parents if he could stay. So then the next kid that comes up to him, I guess he's talking, her name is Sing. I was trying to, like, hear, I had to repeat the scene. I was like, is her real name Sing? And he kept saying, like, can you sing? And she said no. And then the twins, the name is Kyle and Dana. And that is their real names in real life. And I was trying to figure out if they're on anything, like, I was looking them up and I couldn't find anything about them. And the club asked them if they can sing a song, and they were like, yeah, let's do a song. So they do a song, and they did this song, I think, if I counted it correctly, 4 times, because they kept getting interrupted by Cliff. And so they say, like, the song's about a boyfriend, and Cliff interrupts with saying, like, you got a boyfriend? And they're like, no, it's part of the game, you know, we don't have boyfriends. And so then he lets them sing the song again. And then he stops them again. And they're like, how old is this boyfriend? And they were like, 2 years old. 2 years old? Like, he's like, what? That's not possible. And he's like, how do a 2-year-old have money to buy ice cream? And so they sing the song again and again. So I want you guys to actually listen to a clip of the song.
And this is the actual final version where they actually gotten through the whole song. And it's just cute and I love it. So listen up.
Una, dos, siesta, get it, eat. I met my boyfriend at the candy store. He brought me ice cream, he brought me cake. He brought me home with a bellyache. Mama, mama, I'm so sick. Call the doctor, quick, quick, quick. Doctor, doctor, will I die? Can't survive and be alive. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm alive.
And then Theo comes back in and says that Peter can stay as long as he wants. You know, clearly they don't want their child back. Cliff asks, what does it feel to be the only man with 7 women? And everyone laughed. All the girls laugh and everything. So then we go into Act 2, and Denise is playing music and dancing with the kids. Cliff comes down with Peter and turns off the music and tells Denise to go check on the food that Theo's making. And so she goes and checks and tells all the kids, come and get it, and they all run to the kitchen. We see Theo holding a bunch of hot dogs in his hands, and everyone's jumping at him. He just can't move. He's stuck. They're all around him. And so when Cliff comes in, he gets all the kids to sit down, and then he teaches them a chant to bang the table and demand for their hot dogs, and they get the hot dogs. Then after they're done eating, they go back in the living room and they play bucking horse. This is the famous scene that everyone knows from this series of all the kids being on Cliff's lap, and basically just his leg is a horse, so they're going up and down. So we start off with Rudy, and then Sing goes next, and he calls her Sing-a-Song because her name is Sing. And then there's Nyoko, and then there's Desiree, and then the twins go for... One of the twins goes, but then stops right away because she just, I guess, couldn't handle it. And then the other twin goes. I don't know if it was Kyle or Dana. Don't know. And then there is the friend that Rudy calls Maria. The person that's playing Maria is the legendary singer and songwriter Alicia Keys. And so she goes on to the bucking horse, and she wins the prize according to Cliff. And then Peter goes up to Cliff because he didn't have a turn yet, and Cliff was like, I kind of don't want to do this, you know. But Peter he doesn't want to be left out, right? That's the thing with kids. Each kid has to have it has to be fair. And Peter, it's his turn and he wants to do it. And Cliff's face is just like, I don't know how this is going to work. He's just going to fall off. And he grabs him, and he's literally falling off, his face down to the side, back down to the other side. And then it ended right there. And all the girls were laughing like crazy. And I feel like when I first saw this episode, I was laughing like crazy because I was their age when I first watched this episode. And then after that was over, Peter and Cliff shake hands at the end. And he goes back to his spot on the table. It's so cute. The fact that he just sits there cross-legged on the table. And then Cliff says, now it's monster time. And he starts to use a scary voice and starts chasing the kids all around. And they all run around and hide in certain places of the living room. And the doorbell rings, and it's Grandpa Russell. He's just always around, it seems like. And Russell asks, does Rudy got new brothers and sisters? And Cliff was like, well, I deliver all of them, and the parents didn't want them, so I kept them. Russell just laughed. And so Cliff tells the kids, go get a cookie. Theo has it. And Russell is like, oh, you're pulling the cookie trick at 6 p.m. And Russell says Cliff looks tired and asks where Claire is. And of course, Cliff says that Claire is at a seminar and that he is planning to take care of the kids for the evening. And Russell decides to make a bet for $20. If he is left alone with the children for 60 seconds, he is able to make all those kids be quiet and be little angels. And Cliff was like, that's not possible. Like, unless you plan to threaten a child. And Russell was like, I'm not going to threaten any of them. Let's make this bet. And Cliff was like, okay, let's make this bet. And so Cliff goes to the kitchen and tells the kids to go to Russell, and they all run and jump onto him. I felt bad. I was like, what happens? You always imagine, like, if there's too much pressure that where the chair goes backwards, I would, like, that's the only thing I was scared about this. I was like, this guy he's an old man. Don't hurt him, you know? I always think of the negative things, which is not good. Don't think like me. And so Cliff goes into the kitchen and explains what's happening to Theo. And one of the things I noticed throughout this episode that I believe Theo is wearing a Morehouse shirt, and Morehouse is HBCU. You're gonna see more of this. I'm just letting you know. And so then he tells Theo about the bet, and Theo was like, "That's not possible." Like. And Theo was like, you should have bet him for $50. And he's like, Cliff was like, no, that's my father. I can't bet him. And so then it's 60 seconds and he goes back into the living room and all the kids are sitting quietly being angels. And Cliff was like, how's that even possible? Like, what? And so, of course, Russell won the bet. And so Russell takes the money and Theo asks him, like, would you want to come to my football booster banquet? And Russell was like, how much are the tickets? And he's like, $5. He's like, I'll take 8 tickets, and gives him that $20 that Cliff bet on. And Theo was like, oh, I filled my quota in the house. I didn't need to leave the house. I love that. Good on him for asking. And so then Russell leaves, and Cliff asks Peter, what did Russell do? And he stays silent because he's just quiet, you know. And so then Peter goes back to his seat, and Cliff asks Rudy, so what did Russell say? He said that in the morning, Cliff is going to give everyone $1. And Cliff just laughed. He's like, that is so not fair. That's not a fair way of getting a kid to be quiet. I feel like Cliff was thinking, like, if you say quiet, everyone be quiet. That's a win. But if you're gonna tell someone that someone's gonna pay a kid, I don't know, that's not really fun, like, fair, you know. So, and that is the end of the episode. Of course, we have Earl playing Grandpa Russell. He is back again, and we're gonna see him again and again throughout the series. There's Peta Costa, who plays Peter, and all the other girls played their names. The only person that didn't actually go by the name of their real name is Alicia Keys, and she's actually billed for her credit as Alicia Cook because that is her government name. Because of course, when she got into music, that's when she changed her performing name to Alicia Keys. So, fun fact that she was on the Cosby Show. I love her. I love her music. I have been a fan of hers since I don't even know how old, maybe 7 or 6, at the same time as when I started watching the Cosby Show. So for this episode, I have no idea what the lesson is. Even though this literally is an episode for the children to learn. I don't know if it's, but I'm not sure if it's for the children to learn or if it's for the children to see what's fun to have a slumber party. I'm not sure. But I have a question for you guys. Did you have a slumber party when you were a kid? I had a lot of sleepovers at friends' house. I don't know if they were considered slumber parties. I feel like I probably went to like maybe 2 actual slumber parties, and those were fun. So let me know using the hashtag slumber party at Black TV Shows Pod on Twitter and Instagram. It's episode 23. The Cosby Show season 23, Mr. Quiet.